At 2:34 on a Thursday afternoon in November of 1978, a bank clerk in Memphis found a check that should not have existed. It was stuck between two ledger pages in an archive box marked 1956. The paper was yellowed, the ink was faded, but the signature was clear: Johnny Cash. The amount line read $0.00. Not blank, not damaged, just zero, written in Johnny's own hand. And beneath the amount, in the memo line, 3 words that made no sense: for what's owed. The clerk stared at it for a long time before showing her supervisor. Because a check for nothing isn't a mistake, it's a statement, and someone had kept it for 22 years. This is the story of a debt Johnny Cash tried to pay with a worthless piece of paper, and the man who refused to let him forget what it meant. Johnny had been famous for over a decade by 1978. Records sold, tours packed, everyone knew his name. But in 1956, he was nobody. Just another kid from Arkansas trying to break into the music business in Memphis. He had a wife, a baby, rent he couldn't always make, and a dream that felt more like desperation than ambition. The kind of dream that keeps you awake because if it doesn't happen, you don't know what comes next. He'd been working at a radio repair shop on Union Avenue. $7 a day when there was work, nothing when there wasn't. The job kept food on the table, but not much else. And every evening after work, Johnny would walk 4 blocks to Sun Records and stand outside, hoping someone would notice him, hoping Sam Phillips would take a chance on a kid who couldn't afford studio time but had songs that needed to come out. Most evenings, nothing happened. Sam was busy. The studio was booked. Johnny would stand there for 20 minutes, then walk home. But he kept coming back, because standing outside Sun Records felt closer to his dream than sitting at home waiting for something to change. One evening in late March, a man approached him, older, maybe 50, worn suit, tired eyes. The kind of eyes that had seen too many promises break. The man didn't introduce himself, just asked Johnny a simple question. "You the one who's been standing out here every night?" Johnny nodded. "You got songs?" "Yes, sir." "They any good?" Johnny didn't know how to answer that. Good meant different things to different people. So he said the only truth he knew: they're honest. The man studied him for a moment, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. Not his own card, someone else's. A music publisher in Nashville. The card was bent at the corners. Used. The man held it out. "This is my brother," he said. "He listens to new writers on Tuesdays. You mail him something, you put my name on it. Tell him Raymond sent you. He'll listen. Might not sign you, but he'll listen." Johnny took the card, looked at the name printed there. Raymond Oakes, publisher. He'd heard the name before. Respected in Nashville. Not famous, but solid. Real. The kind of man who could open doors if he wanted to. "Why are you helping me?" Johnny asked. Raymond shrugged. "I see you out here every night. That means something. Most people give up after a week. You haven't. So maybe you got something worth hearing. Or maybe you're just stubborn. Either way, you deserve a chance to find out." Johnny wanted to say thank you, wanted to say something that matched what he was feeling, but the words wouldn't come. So he just nodded, and Raymond walked away. Disappeared into the Memphis evening like he'd never been there at all. That night, Johnny went home and recorded 3 songs on a borrowed tape machine. His voice, his guitar, nothing else. He mailed the tape to Nashville the next morning with Raymond's name written on the envelope. And then he waited. 2 weeks later, Raymond Oakes called. Said the songs were rough but promising. Said he couldn't offer a publishing deal yet, but he wanted to hear more. Said if Johnny could get to Nashville, they could talk in person. Figure out next steps. See if there was something to build on. Johnny didn't have money for the trip. Didn't have gas money. Didn't have anything except the address Franklin gave him over the phone. But he went anyway. Borrowed a car from a neighbor. Drove to Nashville on an empty stomach and half a tank. Got there just before Franklin's office closed. They talked for an hour. Franklin played the tape again. Asked questions. Where did the songs come from? What Johnny was trying to say. What kind of music he heard in his head when he wasn't trying to please anyone. And Johnny answered as honestly as he could, because honesty was the only thing he had that felt valuable. At the end of the conversation, Franklin made him an offer. Not a contract, not money, just a chance. He said if Johnny could write 10 more songs, real songs, Franklin would pitch them to artists in Nashville. No guarantees, no promises, but a legitimate opportunity to get his work heard by people who mattered. Johnny agreed immediately, shook Franklin's hand, drove back to Memphis, and for the next 3 months he wrote every night after work, filled notebooks, scratched out lines, rewrote verses until they felt true. He sent 5 songs to Franklin in May, 5 more in June, and in July, Franklin called again. One of the songs had been picked up, a small artist, a smaller label, but a real recording, and Johnny would get $75 when it released. $75. More money than Johnny had seen in one place in years. More than enough to prove this wasn't a fantasy. This was real. This could work. Johnny wanted to thank Raymond, the man who'd given him the card, the man who'd made the introduction that changed everything. But he didn't know Raymond's last name, didn't know where he worked or where he lived. All he knew was that Raymond stood outside Sun Records one evening and handed him a chance. So Johnny did the only thing he could think of. He went to the bank, opened his account, and wrote a check, made it out to Raymond Oakes, put $0 in the amount line, and in the memo he wrote 3 words, "For what's owed." He knew the check was worthless, knew Raymond couldn't cash it. That was the point, because what Raymond gave him wasn't worth $75. It was worth everything, and there was no amount Johnny could write that would equal that. So he wrote nothing, because nothing was more honest than pretending he could pay it back. Johnny mailed the check with a short note, explained what had happened, explained that the song sold, explained that none of it would have happened without that card, without that moment outside Sun Records. He didn't ask for anything, didn't expect a reply. He just needed Raymond to know that the chance mattered, that it worked, that Johnny hadn't wasted it. 3 weeks later, Johnny received a letter. No return address, just his name and the Memphis apartment where he was living. Inside was the check, uncashed, and a note written in careful handwriting. "You don't owe me anything. I gave you a card. You did the work. Keep this check. When you're tempted to think you got lucky, look at it. Remember, you earned everything that came after. The 0 is the point. You started with nothing. You built something anyway. Don't forget that." The note wasn't signed, but Johnny knew it was from Raymond. He kept the check, put it in his wallet behind his driver's license, and for the next 22 years, it stayed there. A reminder, a strange kind of receipt for a debt that couldn't be paid. He'd take it out sometimes, late at night, after bad shows, after moments when he wondered if he deserved any of this, and he'd look at that 0 and remember what it meant. You started with nothing. You built something anyway. By 1978, Johnny had built a lot. Houses, bank accounts, a catalog of songs people knew by heart. He'd earned things Raymond never could have imagined that night outside Sun Records. But the check stayed in his wallet, because the 0 still mattered, maybe more than it did in 1956. When the bank clerk found the check in the archive, she didn't understand what she was looking at. The signature was genuine. The account was real, but the amount made no sense. Her supervisor thought it was a filing error, something that got mixed in with legitimate checks by mistake. But the date bothered him. 1956. Before Johnny was famous, before anyone cared about his signature. Why would someone keep a worthless check from a nobody? He decided to call the main office, ask if anyone knew the story. And that's when things got complicated. Because the account the check was drawn on didn't belong to Johnny Cash. It belonged to Raymond Oakes, and Raymond had been dead since 1961. The supervisor pulled Raymond's file, looked through the records, and found something strange. Raymond had deposited the check into his own account in August of 1956. Didn't cash it, just deposited it. The bank recorded it as $0, but Raymond kept the receipt, kept the transaction record, kept every piece of paper associated with that worthless check. And when Raymond died, his estate transferred everything to the bank's archive, including the check Johnny wrote for nothing. The supervisor didn't know what to do with that information, so he called Johnny's management office, explained the situation, said the bank had found a personal check from 1956, asked if Mr. Cash wanted it returned, or if he even remembered writing it. The message reached Johnny 3 days later. He was in California, recording, tired, not in the mood for administrative questions. But when his manager explained what the bank found, Johnny went quiet. Didn't speak for a long time. Just sat there holding the phone, remembering. He told his manager to have the bank send the check. He wanted to see it, needed to see it. And when it arrived a week later, Johnny opened the envelope alone. No one else in the room. Just him and a piece of paper he'd written 22 years ago. The check looked smaller than he remembered. Frailer. The ink had faded to a pale brown. His signature was still visible, but softer now, less certain. The zero in the amount line stood out more than anything else. Bold, clear, unmistakable. And beneath it, the memo line. For what's owed. Johnny thought about Raymond, a man he'd met once, spoken to for maybe 5 minutes. A man who gave him a business card and disappeared. And somehow, that man had kept this check, had deposited it, had saved the receipt, had treated a worthless piece of paper like it mattered. Because it did matter. Johnny realized something sitting there with that check in his hands. Raymond hadn't kept it as a souvenir, hadn't kept it to prove he knew Johnny Cash before anyone else did. He kept it because the zero was the message, because Raymond understood what Johnny was trying to say, that some debts can't be paid, some gifts can't be returned, and acknowledging that is more honest than pretending money means anything. Johnny called the bank the next day, asked if they knew what happened to Raymond, when he died, how. The supervisor didn't have many details, just that Raymond passed away in 1961, heart attack, sudden. He'd been working as a night clerk at a hotel in Memphis, lived alone, no family at the funeral except his brother Franklin, the publisher, the man who'd listened to Johnny's tape because Raymond asked him to. Johnny hadn't known Franklin and Raymond were brothers, hadn't made the connection in 1956. He'd been too focused on the opportunity, too desperate to notice, but now it made sense. Raymond hadn't given him just any publisher's card. He'd given him his brother, had used the only connection he had to help a stranger standing outside a recording studio, and then he'd refused payment, refused gratitude, refused everything except the acknowledgement that what he'd done mattered. Johnny tried to find Franklin, wanted to ask about Raymond, wanted to know more about the man who'd changed his life without asking for anything. But Franklin had retired in 1972, moved to Florida, died in 1976. The trail was cold. Everyone who knew Raymond was gone. All that remained was the check, and the zero, and the memo line that still said what it meant to say, for what's owed. Johnny kept the check after that, didn't put it back in his wallet, put it in a frame instead, hung it in his home studio where he could see it while he worked. A reminder. A strange kind of monument to a debt that never closed. And when people asked about it, Johnny would tell them the story. Not all of it, just enough. Just the part about starting with nothing, about someone helping when they didn't have to, about trying to pay them back and realizing you never could. Most people didn't understand. They'd look at the zero and think it was a joke, or a mistake, or some kind of artist statement they weren't smart enough to interpret. But Johnny didn't need them to understand. He understood. And Raymond had understood. And that was enough. In 2003, a few months before Johnny died, a journalist asked him about regrets, about things he wished he'd done differently. And Johnny thought about that question longer than the journalist expected. Finally, he said something that surprised everyone in the room. "I wish I'd found Raymond before he died. Wish I'd told him face to face what that card meant. I wrote him a check for nothing because I didn't know how else to say it, but I should have said it with words. Should have made sure he knew. That's my regret. Not the things I did wrong. The thank you I never said out loud." The journalist asked if Johnny remembered Raymond's last name. Johnny said he did. Oakes. Raymond Oakes. Same last name as Franklin. Brothers. The journalist wrote it down. Said maybe she could find records. Find out more about Raymond. Give Johnny closure. But Johnny shook his head. Said he didn't need closure. Said the check was closure. Said Raymond gave him what he needed in 1956 and then got out of the way. Let Johnny build his life without interference. Without expectation. That was the gift. And looking for more would cheapen it. The journalist didn't push. Just thanked Johnny for his time. And the interview moved on to other questions. Other stories. But that moment stayed with the people in the room, because it revealed something most people didn't see. That Johnny Cash carried debts no one knew about. That fame didn't erase the weight of being helped when you had nothing. That some thank yous last longer than lifetimes. After Johnny died, his family found the framed check in the studio. They almost donated it to a museum. Almost made it part of an exhibit about Johnny's early years. But something stopped them. Maybe it was the memo line. Maybe it was the zero. Maybe it was the feeling that this wasn't meant to be displayed. This was meant to be private. A transaction between two men. One who gave, one who received, and neither one asking for recognition. So they kept it, put it back in storage. And that's where it remains. In a box. In a climate-controlled vault. Next to contracts and awards and photographs of moments the world remembers. But this check is different. This check is for a moment no one saw. A conversation outside a recording studio. A card passed from one stranger to another. A chance that turned into everything. And the amount is still zero. Because that's what it cost Raymond to change Johnny's life. Nothing. Just a moment. Just a choice to help when he didn't have to. And the zero is what Johnny could pay back. Nothing. Because you can't repay kindness. You can only pass it forward. And hope someone else understands the weight of receiving something they didn't earn. Johnny tried to pass it forward. Helped young musicians when he could. Gave advice. Made introductions. Wrote letters. Never asked for credit. Never kept score. Just did what Raymond did. Gave away chances and walked away. Let people build their own lives. Let them feel what it's like to start with nothing and end with something real. And maybe that's the real payment. Not a check, not money, not gratitude written in a memo line. Just the choice to do for someone else what was done for you. To hand a stranger a card. To say their work matters. To walk away before they can thank you properly. To let the zero speak for itself. Johnny Cash understood that. Raymond Oakes taught him. And somewhere in a vault in Nashville, a check for $0 proves they both knew what it meant. Some debts don't close. They just keep traveling. From one person to the next. From one generation to another. And the amount never changes. Because the value isn't in what you pay, it's in what you pass forward. If you've ever been helped by a stranger, if someone gave you something you couldn't repay, maybe you already understand what that check means. Maybe you've been looking for a way to say thank you, and maybe the answer isn't money. Maybe it's just doing the same thing for someone else, handing them a card, giving them a chance, walking away before they can make it complicated. That's the debt Johnny carried. That's the debt we all carry. And the only way to pay it is to keep it moving, keep it alive, keep it honest. For what's owed, $0, and everything that comes after.